Wa. Hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. Today, we're just going to go ahead and continue reading from this book we've been reading from recently, just to get it out the way and also keep getting the drop from it. And also, we'll add something towards the end, a little bonus. But again, the book is The 10 Tribes of Israel, historically identified with the Aborigines of the Western Hemisphere by Mrs. Simon. All right, 1836, I believe. Yeah, 1836 when this was written. All right, we're going to go to a specific part of the book. And it says here on page 201, Peruvians. The Peruvian history is enveloped in an obscurity which the destruction of their historical records has greatly augmented. Bodorini thus laments in a letter to Charles V, all right, Charles V, so-called black man, these barbarous acts of the faith. These burnings have been frequent and very fatal in New Spain. All right, they're destroying the records. The Indians deplore them, and so do the Spaniards. And I lament them because I am convinced that these ancient paintings contain not only particular notices of great literary treasures, but likewise of immense treasures stored up in the times of paganism. I do not despair of being able to perform someday or other a notable service to your majesty. Thus from Antiquities of Mexico, page 407. This works does not admit of giving a detailed account of the character and incidents of the 14 successive Incas who reigned in Peru. Those of the mysterious reformer Manco Capac, of Pachacutec, the ninth in order, of Tupac Yupanqui, and Juania Capac, his son, furnish not a few of those illustrative analogies which it is the object of the present research to concentrate. Brief notices, therefore, of these may suffice to augment the sum of evidence. All right, so Manco Capac and all the rest of them. Real quick, I just want to show you guys you have a clear perspective. All right, so this is the painting right here, and it shows all those people they just listed plus more, the official so-called king's list of the Incas, the royal Incas, up to the one where it reaches Atahualpa Inca. I'm gonna zoom in it for you guys, no worries. And then it shows Charles V, the guy they were talking about just now, the so-called black man. So you guys can see I wasn't making that up. So the first one would be Manco Capac, who they're talking about right now, and then his wife, or the queen, Mama Wakanda Waka. And a little close-up. All right, these are the ones they were just talking about. And of course, Carlos Quinto, or Charles V, Carlos Quinto, the last guy. You got two. So you got Atahualpa Inca, then you got Charles V right next to him taking over the throne. All right, you see? All melanated, both of them so-called black, the Inca and Charles V. All right, so let me just go back to reading so you have a clear perspective who they were talking about, right? Again, Manco Capac Inca, Manco Capac, you see that? So-called black, dark complexion people. All right, the Incas, these are their names. Pachacutic Inca, Yupanqui. All right. Juana Capac, they mentioned him too. Okay, all the way to Charles V. Manco Capac again, Pachacutec, the ninth order, and Tupac Yupanqui. All right, we saw all of them. Juana Capac, we saw all of them. All right, it says Manco Capac is generally spoken of by historians as having introduced the worship of the sun. Dodge the hijack. This mistake seems to have arisen from the title of the Great Light, by which many branches of the Indian people characterize the Creator. And this is perfectly scriptural, as we are taught to consider the sun as a symbol or representation of the great moral light and life, which is emphatically called the Sun of Righteousness. The sun is illustrative of the divine power and Godhead, as well as are all the other works of the Creator. The term great light and its symbol, the sun, seem to have been considered by historians a synonym, and therefore they have erroneously charged the Incas, light by whom as men, and as a community, they were greatly enlightened. Their kings, the Incas, says Garcilaso, descended of the Incas, and the Amautas, philosophers, had some idea of our sovereign Lord, the Creator, whom they called Pachacamac. Pacha signifies the world, and Capac is derived from the verb camar, to animate. Kama is the soul. The Indians regarded Pachacamac as the sovereign creator and preserver of all things here below. They adored him in their hearts as the invisible God. They, however, neither built temples nor offered sacrifice in his name. All right, no sacrifice in his name. But whenever it was pronounced, or that of the son or of the king, it was always with the most reverential awe. From Vega, says Book 2, Chapter 2 in History and Researches. The Inca Tupac Yupanqui, the 11th said, many believe that the sun is a living body, and that he creates whatever exists. If this were truth, he would not confine himself to the same eternal path. We must consider him to be like an arrow, which performs the duty intended by the archer who sped it. Vega, Volume 2, page 93. The respect paid to the sun must have been as the symbol of divine beneficence, even as that paid to their kings as the viceroys and representatives of the Creator, whom they likewise acknowledged as their Redeemer and Sovereign. A long series of ages had, it appears, produced the usual effect on a people without the written standard of appeal, and without that communion and interchange of thought which constitutes writing a blessing or a curse, a great benefit or a great evil. From this retrograde state, the Peruvians were at once recalled by the arrival of a mysterious man and a woman who were first seen on the border of the lake Titicaca. They were still in this state, observes the author of Historical Researches, Chapter 2, page 55, when we are told there appeared on the banks of the lake Titicaca a man and a woman of majestic form, enclosed in decent garments. They were persons of excellent shape and beauty. The titles which these personages bore were Mango Capac, Chief Governor, splendid and rich in virtue, and that of his sister, Mamanchik, Empress and motherly protector of his subjects. See Vega, Book 1, Chapter 26, Historical Researches. These benefactors first told the people that their father, taking pity of their miserable condition, had sent them to reclaim them from their erring ways, to give them laws, teach them morality, and to worship the great light who gave life to all creatures. And find that they were expressly sent to govern them for their benefit and happiness with the same care and goodness with which their father ruled the world. Mango had in his hand a rod of gold, 2 fingers thick and an ell in length. He said that his father, the great light, had given it to him, and told him that when he traveled northward from the lake, whenever he rested, he was to strike the rod into the ground, and where at the first stroke it should go down to the top, on that spot he should build a temple to the great light and fix the seat of his government. This happened in the Vale of Cusco, where he founded that city as the capital of his kingdom. All right, we're gonna get a little review and drop on Cusco like it's the first time after this, but very important about a rod and being put down on the ground, and wherever that, is where they build temple or a town or a settlement. Almost like the Southeast Indian stories of when they were coming from Mexico, that they had this rod and they would put down and see what direction. It was almost like the same thing. It might be related. It says he divided his company into two colonies and called one high and the lower Cusco. So the high and the low, just like we're gonna see later. Jerusalem's supposed to have a high market and a low place. It's two cities in Jerusalem, right? And so Cusco set up the same way. And each of these were at first 1,000 families, which he caused to be registered by quipos, party-colored and knotted fringe, which was all that was required in a government where there were neither letters, money, nor disputes. Manco instituted the Decurions, 1/10, 1/50, 1/100, and 1/500, 1/1000. The last were called curaca, governor. They were censors, patrons, and judges in small controversies. Idleness was punished with stripes. Each colony had a supreme judge. Theft, murders, disobedience to the laws, and adultery were punished chiefly by death. In order not to leave a bad man more incensed or necessitated to commit new crimes, a son's possession were never forfeited, for his father's offenses. These laws had so good an effect that sometimes a year passed without one execution. After a long and revered reign, at the approach of the last period of life, Manco Capac called together all his children and grandchildren. He told them he was going to repose himself with his father. To his eldest son he left his empire, and advised and charged them all to continue in the paths of reason and virtue, which he had taught them, until they followed him on the same journey, and that this was the only course by which they could prove themselves the children of the great light, and as such be honored and respected. He commanded his successor, whose name was Sinchi Roca, to govern his people with justice, mercy, pity, clemency, and care of the poor, and that when he should go to rest, he should give the same instructions and exhortations to his successor. The Peruvians attributed all their laws, civil and religious, to Manco Capac, in which they thought had been communicated to him by his father, the Great Light, or the Most High, or who is this Great Light, the Great Truth. But their laws were either new or reformed from ancient times. The Incas pretend, adds the historian, that one of their kings was a great legislator. They say that he was a sovereign priest, and further that he was a renowned captain who conquered a number of provinces and kingdoms. The following account is replete with internal evidence of the identity of race. The son of this emperor and his endeavors to abolish idolatry and introduce the worship of the moral light, whence all that is good is derived, and to whom therefore whatever is good ought to be rendered as a tribute of allegiance, made several successful attempts, his troops always by his order acting on the defensive, at length submitting the curacas and others, fearful of being punished for their obstinacy, went to the Inca to demand pardon. The children marched first, followed by their mothers. Then the aged, the soldiers and officers and their curacas, with their hands bound and ropes round their necks, in acknowledgement that they merited death for presuming to oppose the descendants of the great light. To mark their extreme humility, they approached barefoot. The emperor received them seated upon his throne, surrounded by his officers. The curacas prostrated themselves before him, addressing his majesty in terms of veneration and religious respect. They supplicated most humbly for pardon, but if it were his majesty's pleasure that they should suffer death, they should consider their lot not unhappy, if the lives of the soldiers who had acted under their authority should be granted along with those of the aged, the women, and the children. The Inca commanded that their hands should be untied and the ropes removed from their necks. I did not come hither, said the emperor, to deprive you of your lives or your property, but rather to enrich you and teach you to live according to the laws of reason and of nature, to quit your idols and adore the great light as your benefactor and your God. Therefore, return to your dwelling and continue in the same power that you have hitherto enjoyed. There you may remain in health and obey laws which are for your common advantage. The Inca then permitted the curacas, in the name of the people, to embrace his right knee in token of his protection. All right, so again, they're giving you the sources where they're writing this. All right, as you guys can see, then it's just the writer's not just, I'm just making this up. This is what is in these journals and books of the early Spaniards, what they're interpreting and seeing also, together with the tradition of their migration and those future hopes which Peruvians held in common with the other tribes. It may be well to notice a discovery near Cusco, which shows that the Peruvians had been preceded by a more ancient portion of the transatlantic family. They're going to say people came from somewhere else, right? That's the hijack. But very important, which I was going to mention just now, is that, when they talk about Inca, what Incas is Manco, the original Incas, the same as the later Incas when the Spaniards got there, or because we know, as it says here, that there was actually more ancient people in Peru before the Incas arrived. This is something we have to keep in mind as well. So who are these so-called Inca? What type of Inca are they talking about? But let's keep reading. It says, that there is a more ancient portion of the family here. There's near the lake Shukchitu by Titicaca, there was found a high hillock made by the hands of man. The foundation was of immense masses of stone, well cemented, to prevent the prodigious terraces from falling upon each other. At some distance there were two stone giants with garments that reached the ground and a cap on the head. They appeared defaced by time. In another place there was many extraordinary buildings, among which were grandes portes, many quite entire, the four corners of each consisting of a single stone. Almost all of them rested on stones of incredible magnitude, some being 30 feet long, 15 wide, and 6 thick. It is impossible to conceive by what means these stones had been cut. There is a hall 40 feet by 22. There are stones with representations of men and women cut upon them, some sitting, others with vases in their hands, etc., and some as if crossing a rivulet, and statues of women with children at their breast, some so well executed as to appear quite natural. The Indians knew nothing of their origin. All right, that's the hijack. Inca Roca erected schools for the education of the princes. It was a saying of this Inca that if there be anything in this lower world which we might adore, it is a wise and virtuous man who surpasses all other objects in dignity. But how can we pay divine honors to one who is born in tears, who is in a daily state of change, who arrived but as yesterday, and who is not exempt from death, perhaps tomorrow? Pachacutec, the reformer, had an army of 50,000 men. He made conquests of countries extending about 130 degrees of latitude. He founded schools and erected several palaces, temples, and aqueducts. He made many new laws and regulations. He was severely just and was esteemed as a wise monarch. The following were some of his apothegms. I don't know if I said that right. He who envies the wise and good is like the wasp which sucks poison from the finest flowers. Right? And then he says again, drunkenness and anger admit of reformation, but folly is incurable. He who kills another unlawfully condemns himself to death. A noble and generous heart is known by the patience with which it supports adversity. How ridiculous is he who is not able to count by quipos, and yet pretends to number the stars. They got that from Vega's Histories and Researches, right? Again, very old books. The Inca Yupanqui was by universal consent surnamed the Charitable. His son Tupac Yupanqui, all right, preserved the conquest of his virtuous predecessors. All right, again. So who we talking about? Tupac Yupanqui or Topa Yupanqui, as they put them here. You see what they look like? Let me just zoom in for y'all. Okay, Inca Yupanqui, Topa Yupanqui, Tupac Yupanqui, Pachacutic. All right, Vida Cocha, huh? Tupac Ushvi Oscar, Juana Capac. Okay, Tupac Yupanqui, all right? Copper colored tribes of America. You see what's going on here? So again, the Inca Yupanqui and his son Tupac Yupanqui. We just saw these two men right here again. Inca Yupanqui and Tupac Yupanqui, his son, his successor. You see that? See that? That's them right here. This is how they drew them. This is how they got them in the Larco Museum in Lima. A historical painting. All right. Inca Yupanqui and Tupac Yupanqui. Yeah. So his son Tupac Yupanqui preserved the conquest of his virtuous predecessors. He governed his empire with wisdom and mildness. The emperor at length, feeling the approach of death, gave orders that his children should come into his presence to hear his last injunctions. He recommended them by living in peace and in justice, to prove themselves the true children of the Supreme Light. He commanded his successor to pursue the conquest of the barbarous nations in the imitation of his predecessors. Thus died that excellent monarch. His grateful subjects rewarded his noble actions and benevolent heart with the title of Tupac Yaya, or Resplendent Father. Vega and his History and Researches, chapter 2, page 91. These are quotes from primary sources from anthropological books, old ones. The deceased emperor's body was embalmed with solemn ceremonies and with so much art that it appeared as if still alive when seen by Vega in the year 1556. So again, we're getting Vega's writings from 1500. Among other maxims of this Inca, he said, avarice and ambition, like other passions, have no bounds of moderation. The first unfits a man for the government of his own family or for any public employment. The second renders the understanding not susceptible of the counsels of the wise and virtuous. Juana Capac, after the year of mourning for his father had expired, set out to visit his dominions and was everywhere received with triumphal arches and ways strewed with flowers. All right, Hayana. Again, we have Hayana right here, right next to them. Is this one right here. See? Hayana Capac, Inga, or Jinga, India, India, They're right here. Hayana. He had not proceeded far when, on hearing the joyful tidings of the birth of his son, he instantly returned to Cusco. Cusco, huh? After 20 days of every possible demonstration of joy, the emperor, wishing to signalize the day on which his firstborn son was to receive his name, invented the famous golden chain, 700 feet in length and about as large as a man's wrist. In 2 years it was finished, and the fete was ordered to take place. The dancers, who consisted of the royal princes and great persons at court, held this chain instead of taking each other by the hand, as was usual. They advanced with gravity and solemn cadence, singing the praises of the Inca toward the throne where he was seated. This chain was never been found, or has never been found, huh? They stole it, you see that? Having been secreted on the first arrival of the Spaniards or Pizarro, they took it. All right. Huayna Capac, the one we just saw, departed from an army for the conquest of the provinces, with an army, right? But was informed that of Chachapayas was in revolt and had killed the commanders and soldiers, the rest having been made slaves. On this, the emperor concentrated his troops and sent an offer of pardon to the rebels if they would return to their obedience. This proposal was received with insolence. The clement and gallant character of the emperor was well known, and some of these elders, with tears in their eyes, prevailed on a lady of their city, who had been one of the mistresses of Tupac, Yupangi, father to his majesty, to wait on the emperor and claim his compassion. She traveled 2 leagues, and having prostrated herself before him, accompanied by many women, threw herself at the Inca's feet. "Our sole lord," said she, "is it your intention to destroy a province which has been subdued by the arms of the emperor, your father? Would you not tomorrow repent? You who have so just a claim to your title of protector of the poor. If pardon cannot be granted to the rebellious as they have laid down their arms, take compassion on them, and the reputation which the descendants of the sun enjoyed for their humanity will be crowned by such virtuous forbearance. But if you resolve on revenge, let me be the first sacrifice, that I may not witness the ruin of my native land." To this speech the rest of the women, bathed in affliction, added, "Great Huayna Capac, have pity on us, on our fathers, our husbands, our brothers, and our infant children." The Inca stood silent, but being affected by the tears of the women, he approached Mamacuna and made her rise from the ground. "That tomorrow I should regret an act of severity is certain, and it is to your prudence that your nation will owe their lives and fortunes. Return to them with these tidings, and if you find that they can be grateful for my kindness, I empower you to grant them in my name any other favor you may think right. As a proof of my sincerity, you shall be accompanied back to your town by 4 Incas, who are your own sons and are my brothers, attended only by a few officers proper to establish order, but not by any soldiers." The Chachapoyas were so sensibly affected at this unexpected mercy that they environed the spot where the emperor had received his mother-in-law with a triple wall. The inner one was of beautiful stone. There are fragments now visible, and these walls would have lasted for ages had not foreigners, says Vega, demolished them in the hopes of finding hidden treasure, right? In the 1500s, they're destroying this wall, says Vega, right? Again, we're quoting these old books. The history and research is probably of the Peruvians or South American. The book by Vega. It says, while Huayna Capac was reposing himself in one of the most magnificent palaces in all Peru, at Tumipampa, a messenger brought intelligence that some extraordinary men, such as they had never seen before, had landed upon the coast from a vessel of an uncommon appearance, and that they were making active inquiries. An ancient oracle having predicted the destruction of the empire by strangers of such description, the emperor was too much alarmed to think of further conquest, and to add to his uneasiness, 3 years before this event, during the celebration of the Feast of the Great Light at Cusco, a large eagle had been pursued and harassed by 5 or 6 small vultures, and as many waterfowls, till they tore and disabled him to that degree that he fell, as if for succor, in the great square in the midst of the Incas. They endeavored to nourish and cherish the eagle, but he died in a few days. The augurs declared unanimously that this was a presage of the ruin of the state and the extinction of their religion. This prodigy was succeeded by earthquakes, which threw down high mountains. The sea left its ordinary bounds, and frightful comets appeared. Dracons appeared, A Layaka one day ran to the emperor in tears, and so out of breath that he could scarcely speak, to assure him that his mother, the moon, was surrounded by 3 circles, one of which was the color of blood, the second dark green, and the outer one appeared like smoke, and to explain to him that Pachacamac, by these signs, indicated the extirpation of the royal family and the ruins of the whole empire. Although Juana Capac was not insensible to these omens, he would not show a want of fortune. "Out of my sight," said he. "Thou hast dreamed all this nonsense about my mother and the moon. I will believe none of your augurs that the sun will permit the destruction of his children till Pachacamac himself assures me of it." The Inca, to provide for misfortunes, raised a fine army, consisting of the best troops in the garrisons of the empire. He ordered all the soothsayers in the different provinces to consult the oracle of Rimac, and particularly the great Pachacamac, regarding the interpretation of these commotions in the elements. Their replies were ambiguous, but nothing extraordinary occurred before the death of the emperor. Pizarro, in the year 1526, had landed at Tumbes, and the Spaniards for the first time feasted their eyes with the sumptuous temples. Listen, they saw what? Temples and palaces, the gold and silver opulence and civilization of the Peruvians. Pizarro sailed to Spain with these extraordinary tidings, and returning, he invaded Peru. In February 1531, he landed in the Bay of St. Matthew with 144 infantry and 36 cavalry, and was reinforced with about 120 men under the Bencansar and Soto. Pizarro pretended that he was an ambassador from a powerful monarch, and that he came to enlighten the Peruvians with a knowledge of truth and to lead them to happiness. All right, he tricked them. He knew the legends. He therefore offered his aid to Atahualpa against those enemies who disputed his title to the throne. All right, Atahualpa, huh? So real quick, you see Atahualpa right here, the last emperor, and you know what happened to him? He got tied up and tortured and pulled apart. He got murdered by the people working under Charles V, another so-called black man. More and more war, right? So Pizarro tricked him into say, "Hey, I'll help you against your enemies. You know, I'm just here to bring peace and teach you guys all and bring you all this knowledge and all that." That was the hijack of hijacks. They're liars. They was lying. "So I'll help you with your enemies, huh?" The Inca's fears were removed. He professed friendship for these mysterious strangers and sent them presents of great value. When Pizarro had posted himself securely in the palace of Cachamalca, he dispatched his brother Ferdinand and Soto to the camp of Atahualpa. They were received with cordial friendship. They were astonished at the order of the court and the reverence paid to the Inca. Their senses were dazzled by the rich ornaments of dress, the vessels of gold and silver, and the number of other ornaments of every kind during the repast, all made of those precious metals, right? This is what they're running into. Temples and palaces, you know, full of gold, golden walls, golden outside there, the outside of the walls, everything. This is what Marco Polo was describing when he said, "I went to go see the Grand Khan with his golden temples and palaces, all these precious metals." That's where he had come to the Americas. Yeah. It says Pizarro invited the Inca to pay him a visit. Atahualpa prepared himself to appear with magnificence on so interesting an occasion. He arrived sitting on a throne, which was carried on the shoulders of his principal attendants, his dress being adorned with precious stones, plates of gold, and plumes of various colors. He was preceded by 400 guards, was attended by singers, and more than 30,000 men. When the Inca was near, Father Vincent Valverde advanced with a crucifix and breviary. He explained, among other doctrines, the appointment of St. Peter and the transmission of his power to the popes who had made a donation of the New World to the King of Castile. He therefore required Atahualpa to embrace the Christian faith and submit to the king. You guys hear that right away? These mysteries were badly interpreted and were incomprehensible to the Inca, who was indignant. He asked where these things had been learned. In this book, said Valverde. The Inca approached the volume. It is silent, said he. It tells me nothing. The book ain't talking. That I don't see. It ain't telling me nothing. And threw it on the ground. That's what Atahualpa did. All right. It was probably their Christian Bible, right? The enraged monk ran to his companions. To arms, Christians! To arms! Avenge this insult on those impious dogs. The martial music struck up. The cannon and muskets were fired. The horse sallied out to charge, and the infantry rushed on sword in hand. Pizarro dragged the Inca to the ground, and the carnage did not cease till the close of the day. The Peruvians, confounded and dismayed, made no resistance. You see what happened? Oh, let's be friends with these mysterious strangers. You see what happened? Well, it's also, Deuteronomy 28 too. For thousands were slaughtered, and no Spaniard was even wounded by them. The plunder was immense. Atahualpa, after being forced to submit to a mock trial, was condemned to be burned. But on a promise that this would be mitigated if he would embrace the Christian faith, he consented, and instead of being consumed in the flames, was strangled at a stake in 1533. You guys hear what happened to Atahualpa? All right, so, when they're painting him here, oh, yeah, I'm just giving you my scepter, right? I'm going to just give it. Look, they show him giving the scepter to Charles V, right? Charles V. But he got strangled and killed by force. His throne got taken by force. Atahualpa, all right? Atahualpa. Charles V became the new emperor. He became the king. The scepter is being passed. Look how they drew this, the scepter. And he comes with his cross, his Christianity, and his hand gestures, Masonic hand gestures. Yeah, the Habsburgs are in town. Purchas remarks that none of the perpetrators of this infamous act died a natural death. This was after having accepted as a ransom for the Inca's liberty to be paid in 3 months as much gold and silver as would fill a room 25 feet long and 15 feet wide, and as high as a line which Soto scratched upon the wall with his sword. All right. So De Soto was here in the conquest of the Incas before he actually had gone to the southeast, just in case you guys didn't know. Right, this is where he was coming from as he had murdered and said, remember, none of these people died a natural death. They got their karma back, It was filled in 2 months and a half and amounted to 4,600,000 ducats. All right, Gomara wrote that in Purchas, Volume 5, page 230. It says Garcia in the 7th chapter of the 5th book of the origin of the Indians says of the Peruvians, we have still to state that the Peruvians relate of their origin, which I shall narrate as Joan Betancos writes it, who was one of the first who entered that kingdom, who was well acquainted with the language of the Indians called Quichua, or Quichua, language of the Incas, and being thus qualified, served as an interpreter and linguist, and was on that account ordered by Don Mendoza, Viceroy of Peru, to compose a history of the origin of the Incas of Peru, procuring the necessary information from the earliest Indians. Formerly in ancient times, the kingdom and provinces were enveloped in obscurity. A lord named Contis Veracocha came forth from a lake which is in the province of Collasugo, and brought along with him a certain number of persons. Antiquities of Mexico, Volume 6, page 404, Veracocha. Vega says the certainty that the law would be executed rendered crime so uncommon that a year was or has passed without capital punishment being inflicted throughout the whole empire. The poor who were blind, dumb, maimed, aged, or deceased were fed and clothed out of public magazines. and to enable them to forget their sufferings, they were occasionally permitted to be present at public festivities. Not any of them, nor even children after 5 years of age, were permitted to be idle. Each had employment suited to their powers. The temples and private dwellings were visited by persons appointed to that duty to see that the household arrangements, cleanliness, and the proper education of children were attended to. But these laws and customs are gone by, and it may be said that the natives are again in a barbarous condition, or a Vega from the 1500s. The Peruvians had such extraordinary respect and affection for their Incas that there is no instance of personal treason to their prince. The Incas have the high merit of never permitting their subjects to be oppressed by the governors, some of whom were sovereigns, some subalterns. Such was the state of the people that drunkenness was scarcely ever known, and no one durst take a single measure of maize from his neighbor. All right? This is all written. This is what he was seeing. The place of Charichangha, which means of treasure, is where the temple of the sun is situated. It is called Yutipampa, place of the sun. The temple was founded by Manco Capac, but its chief glory belongs to Inca Yupanqui, who endowed it with riches and splendor surpassing human belief. What we call the altar was one on the east side of the temple. The four walls were covered with plates of gold. All right, the walls covered with gold. On the great altar stood a representation of the sun in doubly thick gold and richly set with jewels. It was so immensely large that it almost reached from one side of the temple to the other. It was so placed that the sun, in rising, cast his beams upon it, which were reflected with such refulgence that it seemed another sun. At the side of this image, for the Indians had no other idol, were the bodies of the deceased emperors ranged according to their antiquity, and so perfectly embalmed and preserved that they appeared as if alive. They were seated upon thrones of gold, which were placed upon tables of the same metal. The visages of the Incas were as if looking on the floor of the temple at a figure of the moon, with a female visage as the sister and wife of the sun. All the decorations were of silver. The bodies of the departed empresses were ranged like those of the Incas, the mother of Huayna Capac being placed opposite to the moon's image. The next pavilion was also decorated with silver. It was dedicated to the evening star, and the Pleiades, which were represented on the ceiling. The Pleiades, huh? Another pavilion was consecrated to thunder and lightning, and thunderbolts as servants of the sun, and therefore the ornaments were all of gold. The fourth was dedicated to the rainbow, as emanating from the sun. The fifth was lined entirely with gold, and was for the special use of the royal high priest of sacrifices, and in which all the temple deliberations were held. Some of the doors led to schools, where the Incas listened to the debates of the philosophers, or themselves explained the laws and ordinances. All right, says C. Rankin's Historical Researches, Claviguero. All right, so again, this is their interpretation of what they're seeing, right? Oh, this is for sacrifices. Oh, this means the sun's, the gold represents the sun. This is their interpretation of what they're seeing. It is not too much to suppose, observes the commentator of Antiquities of Mexico, Lord Kingsborough, right, that the Hebrews did on their arrival in Cusco. All right, listen to what Lord Kingsborough said, that the Hebrews did on their arrival to Cusco and on their acquiring wealth and power in the country, determined to commemorate their ancient temple by building 3 other temples of great magnificence in imitation of it, such as were the temple of Pachacamac, situated at the distance of 4 miles from the city of Lima, and the great temple of Mexico. The foundation stones of the former of these temples are said by some Spanish writers to have been soldered together with gold and silver, and the interior plated with gold, as was also those of the famous temple of Cusco, which was likewise dedicated to the worship of Pachacamac, who, as the priest pretended, delivered oracular answers to those who came to inquire of him. The following passage from Sahagun's history, which deserves to be considered in connection with the Peruvian tradition of men having been created by Veracocha or Verachocha after the images made by himself. You must make offering of papyrus and copal, and likewise give food to the hungry, who have neither meat nor drink, nor withal to clothe them. Do your best also to clothe the naked. Consider that their flesh is thine, and that they are men like thyself, and especially the suffering, for they are the image of God. It is not this the fast that I have desired, to deal thy bread to the hungry, that thou bring the poor outcast into thy house, when thou seekest the naked, that thou clothe him, and that thou hide not in thyself from thine own flesh. All right, that's in Isaiah. So why is he quoting that? Because it's the exact same thing he just quoted about what the Incas were saying. Exact same thing the Incas were saying. So where the Incas getting that from? Who are they? I'm talking about some of the, what's really going down here, right? We're talking about Cusco, South America. We're talking about true old world, who these people are, right? This receives much illustration when the following particulars are considered. The king of Israel was not to be a stranger, example, one out of the nations, but a brother, their flesh and bone. And yet from this brother king, the same prophet testifies that the remnant of the two tribes who returned from the Babylonian captivity should hide their faces. Isaiah, is that 53? Again, there is a prophetic illustration in the judgment of that brother king, for it is to be noted that although he was born king of the Israelites, he acknowledged that not the title without the government and supremacy, with which at his second coming in that character he shall be invested. All right, we're talking about Jesus, that's what they're talking about. His words as a prophet therefore are, when the Son of Man cometh, his glory, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory, and before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them from one another, and a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats. Then shall he say to them at his right hand, Come ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. I was an hungered, and ye gave me meat. I was athirst, and ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me in. I was naked, and ye clothed me. For truly I say unto you, inasmuch as you have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. All right. So, okay, that's from the New Testament, right? And it's funny because it's literally what Isaiah said, just a little more in depth. So this is what I'm saying. It is remarkable fact that the primitive inhabitants of the new continent implicitly obeyed this precept, both in their reception of the shipwrecked Spaniards and of the first handful of feeble and sick colonists who settled in New England, although no debtors of theirs, either for spiritual or temporal benefits. Salvation is of the Israelites. All right. It says it is to be regretted that the same writer has to record in the following terms the extensive destruction of ancient monuments and paintings which followed the arrival of Spanish missionaries in Yucatan, which would have thrown light on the colonies of Cosas and his companions. The ecclesiastics of this province, whose care accelerated the conversion of these Indians to our holy church, animated with the zeal which they felt for their interest, destroyed all the books which they possessed, composed after their peculiar style, by which they were enabled to preserve the memory of past events. Wow. And so they destroyed, their original books, and then they created like facsimiles, right? So that's all we got today, facsimiles, right? These so-called codices. This is the reason why some particular facts which I wish to notice in this work cannot be ascertained, but even the knowledge of these historical annals has been denied to posterity for nearly all their histories were committed to the flames without any attention being paid to the difference of the matter of which they treated. The writer adds, "Neither do I approve of that suggestion, nor do I condemn it, but it appears to me that secular history might have been preserved in the same manner as in New Spain and the conquered provinces. It has been preserved without being considered to be any obstacle to the progress of Christianity." Historia Yucatan, right? Antiquities of Mexico as well. Besides a certain degree of conformity on these doctrinal points, for example, original sin, repentance, vicarial atonement, a future redeemer, and the resurrection of the body, they likewise seem to have been acquainted with the sacraments, although superstition had lamentably perverted them. Since traces of these may be found in various rites and ceremonies common alike to the Mexicans and Peruvians, having briefly mentioned what particular doctrines these were, which the gravest writers assert were known to the Indians before the arrival of the Spaniards, all right, before the arrival, they had all these traditions in the New World, we shall proceed separately to adduce proof to show that the above mentioned doctrines did in reality constitute a portion of Indian faith. And although many testimonies from different authors might be cited in confirmation of each article, it will be sufficient in this place to quote the single authorities of men like Acosta, Peter Martyr, Garcia, and that's Garcia de la Vega, and I don't know who I want to say, and Torquemada, whose writings are highly approved in Spain and are also known to the rest of Europe. All right, all these people said that they found the lost tribes, or that somehow they knew Hebrew stuff. We've read about it. We've quoted them. The doctrine of vicarial atonement, or a sacrifice for sin, whereby the guilt of one party is expiated and atoned for by the guiltless blood of another, was well known to the Indians. And the question is curious, how traces of this doctrine should have been known in America. The following extract is from the pen of Rosales, prosecuting their conquest as far as the country of the powerful lord Diunchatipec, 5 leagues distant from the city of Concepcion. They, or Conception, right? They, the Spaniards, found another fortress where were 7 stones resembling sculptured pyramids, which had been placed there by the Indians of Peru for the purpose of performing the ceremony of Chalpanch. If our surprise was excited by this discovery that the Peruvians were not altogether ignorant of the nature of vicarial sacrifice and atonement, it will be produced in no less degree when we discover that the inhabitants of New Spain generally believed in the coming of a future Redeemer or Savior, whose advent as well as the last destruction of the world they seem to have expected at the close of a certain stated period, corresponding with the artificial cycles of time which they employed in their calendars. All right, it was, observes the commentator, the cupidity of the Spaniards which first introduced to them the belief of the Indians in the resurrection of the body. Gomara, after stating that the Peruvians deposited gold and silver vases in the tombs of the Incas, says, "When the Spaniards opened those sepulchres and scattered the bones, the Indians entreated them not to do so, assuring them that they would be raised in the resurrection." All right, they already knew about that, for they fully believed in the resurrection of the body, as well as the immortality of the soul. Herrera, in several passages, asserts that the Indians maintained this belief. In La Historia de los Indios, he says, in his 4th decade, page 187, in the provinces of Guayaquilio and Yucatan, they believed that the dead would come to life. He also says that in the province of Quinabaya, they well knew that there was an immortal principle in man, although they thought, he adds, rather seducingly, it was a bodily transfiguration, believing that the body would be renewed to life. All right, so he added his hijack. They further explained that its future habitation would be a delightful and pleasant place. Thus writes Ulloa, respecting the contrast between the ancient magnificence and present degradation of the modern Peruvians. You see, a different type of people, from the ancient ones they write about. The disproportion between what I read and what I am going to relate is so remarkable that on a retrospect of past times, I am utterly at a loss how to account for the universal change of things, especially when surrounded with such monuments of the industry, polity, and laws of the Indians of Peru, that it would be madness to question the truth of the accounts that have been given of them, for the ruins of these works are still amazing. On the other hand, I can hardly credit my own eyes when I behold that nation involved in Sumerian darkness, the Sumerians, living in barbarism. But what is still more difficult to conceive is how these people, whose former wisdom is conspicuous in the equity of their laws and the establishment of government so singular as that under which they live, should at present show no traces of that genius and capacity which form so excellent an economy and so beautifully a system of social duties. Hey, it doesn't seem like it's the same people. He's saying the ones they met when they got there, from the ones they're talking about, and the laws and all the codices and all the grandeur and all the stories and the temples. They're saying no, these were our fathers who built this. These were other people who built these places, right? He's like, man, it doesn't seem like it's the same people, the same capacity, which forms so excellent an economy and so beautiful a system of social duties. Though undoubtedly they are the same people and still retain some of the ancient customs and manners, all right? So undoubtedly maybe they are the same people. Such is the disposition of the present race that if their indifference to temporal things did not extend itself also to the eternal, it might be said to equal the happiness of the golden age. They possess a tranquility undisturbed either by fortunate or unfortunate events. In their mean apparel, they are as contented as the monarch clothes with the most splendid inventions of luxury, and so far as they from entertaining a desire for better or more comfortable clothing, that they give themselves no manner of concern about their own, although their bodies continue half naked. They show as much disregard for riches, and even that authority and grandeur within their reach is so little the object of their ambition, that to all appearance it is the same thing to an Indian. The same moderation appears in their food. Fear cannot stimulate, respect induce, nor punishment compel them. They are indeed of a singular turn. All right. De Mononville thus writes, all the Indians on my way were simple, mild, and ingenious because at a distance from the Spanish settlements, but from this place to the Guacha or Guaja, they are sly, subtle, even knavish and idle. And it may truly be said that the neighborhood of Europeans has been a pest, a plague, equally unfortunate and prompt of diffusion. All right. And that was the end of this chapter on the so-called Peruvians. This is just a very talking about specific people here, the Incas and their royal line stories and traditions and their towns like Cusco, right? So because we brought up Cusco, just gonna get this like it's the first time for the dismount, a little bit of what we have researched about Cusco, Peru. Could Cusco be the ancient city of David? Let's go ahead and take a look at that right now. guys. So before we begin, just wanted to go ahead and real quick, in case you're new, this place we're going to be talking about today is in Cusco. This is in Peru. On the upper part of Cusco, or the upper part of the city, is a fortress, an archaeological zone called Saksaywaman, all right, which we're going to link up to the possible real location of the actual fortress or citadel of David, the city of David. All right. Saksauman is overlooking Cusco. It's in the lower part, just like the ancient city of Jerusalem is described as, an upper and lower place of the city, with the city of David, or the fortress, in the upper part, just like you see here. And again, Cusco's in the valley, which had many temples and palaces, as we're about to read. And again, this is a fortress, megalithic fortress, all right, citadel. I wanted to show you this map I found here. And in the map, I wanted to show you this interesting image right here, which we're going to close up real quick. But I have a better image of it. So right here, they're telling you this is Cusco's Metropolis, all right? Cusco Metropolis, Peru. You see that? This is what Cusco looked like when the Spaniards got there. This is not what they built. This is what it already looked like. It had gates, you see, it had towns, palaces, buildings, and it had a big palace over here, right? With 3 walls surrounded it, right? Pay attention to that, 3 walls, all right? Go back to another image of this. This is from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, the Jewish National University Library. All right. Again, this is how they found Cusco when they got there, the Spaniards. All right. As you can see, it has many gates. How many gates? Entrances or gates, and it's surrounded by a wall. So it's like kind of protected. You see, it has its own buildings. It has streets. You see this, as you can see, this building over here. All right, there's already buildings here when the Spaniards got here. They didn't build it. You see this like moss looking. You see the roof of this, oval shaped. You see there's a lot of different palaces and temples. We're about to read what they saw from their first-hand account. And again, pay attention to the 3 walls right here and another palace, and you got soldiers protecting this place, all right? What's interesting about that, huh? This is another depiction of that. Again, this is Cusco. It says here, Cusco, a facsimile from Romicio from 1556. This is how they found Cusco again. This is the city of the Incas, the capital. This is how they found Cusco. We're about to read a little correlation about Cusco and what I was in the, shout out to Drop Nation. Shout out to Perusalem, Con Drop. A lot of people before me that I learned from and correlated. Again, we're going to show some old clips, just get like it's the first time. Again, America's a true old world. Just want to show you one of these gates. It says here, the city gate Cusco in the historical city center. The old city gate of Cusco is part of the historical city center of Cusco. During the Inca Empire, Cusco was the capital. Nowadays, it's a major tourist destination in Peru, all right? But this is one of the original gates. Again, this was already there, all right, when the Spaniards got there, as you can see from the drawing, right? As you can see from the drawing, these gates were already here. You see this gate? All right, this was already here. The Spanish didn't build this when they got there. Dodge the hijack. City of David, Saksaywaman, could it be fortress? We're going to be paying a couple points in this video. We're going to hear about the navel of the world. What does that mean? How does it relate to Cusco and Jerusalem, the navel of the world, right? We're also going to be looking at this structure in the Citadel Saksaywaman. This is right in the middle. All right, this was called the Muyu Marka, the Muyu. The Muyu. What does that have to do with the Mio? The Mio. the Milo, right? The Milo that David built. It says here, the Milo was a structure in Jerusalem first mentioned in book 2 of Samuel's. All right, it was mentioned as being part of the city of David. All right, city of David. What are we saying Saksauman is? The city of David, Saksauman. And this is the Muyu right in the middle. This used to be a tower. Just like the Milo used to be a tower. Used to be a tower. As we can see here. This used to be a tower. We're also going to look into the description of Josephus, right? And other primary sources of Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem was fortified with 3 walls, all right? By 3 walls on such parts as were not encompassed with unpassable valleys. 3 walls. And again, accordingly, it was called the Citadel down here, right? The Citadel by King David. It was a citadel. It was a fortress with 3 walls, right? 3 walls, all right? 3 walls of Saksaywaman, all right? The 3 walls of Saksaywaman, all right? This is the first image I showed you guys, the 3 walls of Saksaywaman. And also, Saksaywaman is a citadel, all right? Is a citadel in the northern outskirts of the city of Cusco, Peru, the historic capital of the Inca Empire, all right? So those are the points we're going to talk about today. I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. Get it like it's the first time. Again, America's a truer world. We're going to get in more depth in this in future videos. We're talking about real biblical locations. All right. We just wanted to get back into this and refresh our minds. All right. So we're going to read from this book real quick. Since we're going to get into Cusco, right? Well, we're going to get into the conquest of Cusco real quick and how they described the city. You know, the Spaniards, when they got there, how they described Cusco. It says here, history of the conquest of Mexico and history of the conquest of Peru by William H. Prescott. So we're going to go all the way to page 982 of this book. This is chapter 8. It says here, disorders in Peru, march to Cusco, encounter with the natives. Chalcuchima burned, arrival in Cusco. Description of the city, treasure found there. It says here, all thoughts were now eagerly turned towards Cusco, of which the most glowing accounts were circulated among the soldiers, and whose temples and royal palaces were represented as blazing with gold and silver. All right, the temples had gold and silver everywhere. With imaginations thus excited, Pizarro and his entire company, amounting to almost 500 men, of whom nearly a third probably were cavalry, took their departure early in September from Caxamalca, a place ever memorable as a theater of some of the most strange and sanguinary scenes recorded in history. All set forward in high spirits, the soldiers of Pizarro, from the expectation of doubling their present riches, and Almagro's followers from the prospect of sharing equally in the spoil with the first conquerors. The young Inca and the old chief Chalcuchima accompanied the march in their litters. They're talking about these were the other indigenous tribes that were allied with the Pizarros who were helping them. Again, they're on their march. They're on their way to Cusco to take it over. I believe they already have Atahualpa murdered, or, you know, the Inca king murdered or imprisoned. So now the people are left alone to defend on their own without their, you know, emperor. And so that's the plan. That's what they're doing right now. So we continue further down. It says, it was late in the afternoon when the conquerors came in sight of Cusco. The descending sun was streaming his broad rays full of the imperial city, where many an altar was dedicated to his worship. The low ranges of buildings shone in his beams like so many lines of silvery light filled up the bosom of the valley. in the lower slopes of the mountains, whose shadowy forms hung darkly over the fair city, as if to shield it from the menace profanation. It was so late that Pizarro resolved to defer his entrance till the following morning, and early on the following day, November 15, 1533, Pizarro prepared for his entrance into the Peruvian capital. The Spanish commander rode directly up the great square. It was surrounded by low piles of buildings, among which were several palaces of the Incas. One of these, erected by Juana Capac, was surmounted by a tower, while the ground floor was occupied by one or more immense halls, like those described in Cachamalca, where the Peruvian nobles held their fetes in stormy weather. These buildings afforded convenient barracks for the troops, though during the first few weeks they remained under their tents in the open plaza, with their horses picketed by their side, ready to repulse any insurrection of the inhabitants. The capital of the Incas, though falling short of the El Dorado, which had engaged their credulous fancies, astonished the Spaniards by the beauty of its edifices. They're talking about Cusco right now. The length and regularity of its streets, streets, edifices, and the good order and appearance of comfort, even luxury, visible in its numerous population. It far surpassed all they had yet seen in the New World. They're coming from Mexico. Remember, they seen already Tenochtitlan, all those places, and they said they had not seen anything like that in the New World. Cusco, I remember they had gold everywhere in these edifices. The population of the city is computed by one of the conquerors at 200,000 inhabitants, and that of the suburbs at as many more. This account is not confirmed, They don't know, as far as I have seen, by any other writer, but however it may be exaggerated, it is certain that Cusco was the metropolis of a great empire, the residence of the court and the chief nobility, frequented by the most skillful mechanics and artisans of every description, who found a demand for their ingenuity and their royal presence. The edifices of the better sort, and they were very numerous, were of stone, The edifices, very numerous. There was already buildings there, were of stone or faced with stone. Among the principal were the royal residences, as each sovereign built a new palace for himself, covering though low a large extent of ground. The walls were sometimes stained or painted with gaudy tints, and the gates were assured, were sometimes of colored marble. And the delicacy of the stone work, says another of the conquerors, the natives far excelled the Spaniards. When it comes to stonework, what did they say themselves? Just quote, there's sources for this, They're telling you, 33, you can find it, the sources for this. You can check the person who wrote this book. They're letting you know, they said it themselves. When they got there, the Sephardic Jews and these Moors, they said it. And the delicacy of the stonework, says another of the conquerors, the natives far excelled the Spaniards, though the roofs of their dwellings, instead of tiles, were only of thatch, but put together with the nicest art. The sunny climate of Cusco did not require very substantial material for defense against the weather. The most important building was the fortress, Was the most important building the fortress, The citadel. Remember, we're going to talk about this today. Saksauman. We're going to talk about, it's a citadel, It's a fortress, just like the city of David, The upper part of Jerusalem. The city of David was a fortress, one of the most important parts of Jerusalem, where David lived. The most important building was the fortress, planted on a solid rock that rose boldly above the city. It rose above the upper city and lower, It was built on hand stone, so finely wrought that it was impossible to detect the line of junction between the blocks. They couldn't, you can't put anything between these blocks, and they don't even have cement mortar or anything like that in between. And the approaches to it were defended by 3 semicircular parapets composed of such heavy masses of rock that it bore resemblance to the kind of work known to architects as the Cyclopean. Cyclopean meaning these giants. They give credit to these giants, Cyclopean, because they don't know who built all these ancient megalithic. They mean megalithic, all right, Cyclopean. The fortress, all right, they're talking about Saksaywaman. The fortress was raised to a height rare in Peruvian architecture, and from the summit of the tower, the tower, the Millo, Muyu Marka, we're gonna see later what that means. The eye of the spectator ranged over a magnificent prospect, in which the wild features of the mountain scenery, rock, woods, and waterfalls were mingled with the rich verdure of the valley, all right, the valley, the lower city, and the shining city filling up the foreground, all blended in sweet harmony under the deep azure of a tropical sky. The streets were long and narrow. They were arranged with perfect regularity, crossing one another at right angles, and from the great square diverged four principal streets connecting with the high roads of the empire. You see this? This was a metropolis. This was a great ancient city. All right, they had their own buildings, roads. All right, the Spanish didn't come and build that stuff. The square itself and many parts of the city were paved with fine pebble. All right, fine pebble. They were paved. The roads were paved. Through the heart of the capital ran a river of pure water, clean water, right through the middle. If it might not be rather termed a canal, the banks or sides of which, for the distance of 20 leagues, were faced with stone. Across the stream, bridges constructed of similar broad flags were thrown at intervals so as to afford an easy communication between the different quarters of the capital. The most sumptuous edifice in Cusco in the times of the Incas was undoubtedly the great temple dedicated to the sun, which studded with gold plates, as already noticed, all right, gold plates on the walls, all right, was surrounded by convents and dormitories for the priest. Convents and dormitories for priests, all right, priests, with their gardens and broad parterres sparkling with gold. Sparkling, listen, this is Cusco. All right, we're talking about where the Grand Khan was. When we're talking about Marco Polo's travels, it's going to be a future video. When we're talking about Prester John's capital, where he dwelled, one of the places he dwelled. All right, we're talking about David, the city of David. All right, when we're talking about gold plates, gardens with broad parterres sparkling with gold, the exterior ornaments had been already removed by the conquerors, all but the frieze of gold, which embedded in the stone still encircled the principal building. It is probable that the tales of wealth so greedily circulated among the Spaniards greatly exceeded the truth, right? If they did not, the natives must have been very successful in concealing their treasures from the invaders. Yet much still remained, not only in the great house of the sun, but in the inferior temples which swarmed in the capital. Pizarro, on entering Cusco, had issued an order forbidding any soldier to offer violence to the dwellings of the inhabitants, but the palaces were numerous, and the troops lost no time in plundering them of their contents. All right, what was it? The palaces? Palaces. We're not talking about teepees. We're not just talking about regular houses. We're talking about palaces, and they were numerous palaces. All right, walls with gold plates on them, palaces. So they were plundering all these palaces, as well as in despoiling the religious edifices. The interior decorations supplied them with considerable booty. They stripped off the jewels and rich ornaments that garnished the royal mummies in the temple of Coricancha. All right, mummies. Peru. Indignant at the concealment of their treasures, they put the inhabitants in some instances to the torture and endeavored to extort from them a confession of their hiding places. They invaded the repose of the sepulchres, in which the Peruvians often deposited their valuable effects, and compelled the grave to give up its dead. No place was left unexplored by the rapacious conquerors, and they occasionally stumbled on a mine of wealth that rewarded their labors, right? So these are, the Spaniards. Remember, we're not talking about just any so-called white, pale-skinned people. We're talking about Sephardic, Moorish people mostly at this time. We're talking about Pizarro and De Soto and all these people. We know who they are. You got to check the genealogical background. A lot of these people were people of colors, is what I'm trying to let you know. All right. More on more war, right, is what they say. And drop nation. In a cavern near the city, they found a number of vast vases of pure gold, richly embossed with the figures of serpents, locusts, and other animals. Among the spoil were the 4 golden llamas, all right, gold, and 10 or 12 statues of women, some of gold, others of silver, which merely to see, say one of the conquerors with some naivety, was truly a great satisfaction. The gold was probably thin, for the figures were all as large as life, and several of them, being reserved for the royal fifth, were not recast but sent in their original form to Spain. All right, they were looting all this, sending it to Spain. The magazines were stored with curious commodities, richly tinted robes of cotton and feather work, feathers and cotton, all right, cotton, gold sandals and slippers. You're hearing? Gold sandals and slippers of the same material for the women, and dresses composed entirely of beads of gold. The grain and other articles of food with which the magazines were filled were held in contempt by the conquerors, intent only on gratifying their lust for gold. Gold's about that gold, right? The time came when the grain would have been of far more value. Yet the amount of treasure in the capital did not equal the sanguine expectations that had been formed by the Spaniards, but the deficiency was supplied by the plunder which they had collected at various places on their march. In one place, for example, they met with the 10 planks or bars of solid silver, each piece being 20 feet in length, 1 foot in breadth, and 2 or 3 inches thick. They were intended to decorate the dwellings of Inca noble. All right, so I just wanted to go ahead and just let you know what they found there in Cusco. Since we're gonna get into Cusco, we're gonna talk about what is there archaeologically and how it matches certain things written in scripture, right? When we're talking about real locations, this ain't about Bible stories, this ain't about religion. We're talking about real history. We're talking about finding real biblical locations, right? In the true old world, the true promised land here in America.
So let's dig into this. And he knew that the Garden of Eden is the Holy of Holies, and the dwelling of the Lord, and Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth. These three were created as holy places facing each other. So again, it's telling us in Jubilee 8:19 that Mount Zion is considered the center of the navel of the earth. Now, you're probably not going to find this in your Bible, because this is an apocryphal book. And if you don't know what that means, it means that certain books were left out. Certain books were edited out. There's a lot of different versions of Bibles all over the world. So Shem got the middle of the earth. I'm telling you, City of David is in Cusco. How does Cusco relate to the middle of the earth or the navel of the earth? Let me show you. And it says here, the meaning of Cusco was the key to the puzzle. So it says further down here, of course, it's the city in Peru, former capital of the Inca Empire. From Quechua, Inca, literally navel, and figurative, meaning center of the world, as the navel is the center of the body. So it says Cusco, meaning center of the world. The navel, is not this the same words that Zion was called in the book of Jubilees? And again, and he knew that the Garden of Eden is the Holy of Holies, and the dwelling of the Lord in Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth. Okay, Jubilee 8:19. Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth.
City of Cusco, here we go. At the breathtaking elevation of 11,200 feet, the city of Cusco was not just the capital of Tiwanaku, laying on the four quarters. In the Inca name for the empire, the native language Quechua was an axis mundi, the center of existence, and a reflection of Inca power.
This is Jerusalem. I have set her at the center of the nations. Ezekiel 5:5. And again, Ezekiel 38:12 says, the Jewish people are referred to as the people who live at the center of the world. And actually, the literal Hebrew reads the navel of the world. Historical note. In Quechua means the earth's navel. Cusco means the earth's navel. Used to be the center of the Inca Empire. Where was the city of David? Saksaywaman, what did we just talk about? So it says again, Saksaywaman was built overlooking the Inca navel of Cusco. The fortress is composed of 3 large terraced walls. Now again, 2 Samuel 5:7. But David did capture the fortress of Zion, which then became David's city. So before it was the city of David, it was Zion, Mount Zion, right? Mount Zion, right. Mount Zion in the center of the navel of the earth. And on the book of Jubilees again, chapter 8, verse 19, we see, and he knew that the Garden of Eden is the Holy of Holies, and the dwelling of the Lord in Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth. So what was the city of David called before it was called City of David? Zion, Mount Zion. And what is Cusco called? The navel of the earth. And where is Saksaywaman? In Cusco, right? And we're calling Saksaywaman the city of David. And it says here in Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth. These three were created as holy places facing each other. It says here, Cusco, the navel of the world. Cusco is an international city located in the Andes Mountains of the Peruvian Sierra. Cusco was the center of the Incan Empire and the navel of the world for its citizens. Alright, so are we seeing a trend here? So let's keep corroborating. It says here, in several 15th century woodcuts from Ravenna, for instance, the world was divided into 3 parts. Jerusalem was in the center. So Jerusalem was in the center again, just like Cusco, just like Zion, just like the city of David, center of the world. And that choice was governed by either religious order or religious cosmology. And a little bit down here, just to continue, it says in Wikipedia regarding the as follows. We'll talk about that soon, but the one in Jerusalem says here in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, it represents in Christian medieval tradition the navel of the world, the spiritual and cosmological center of the world. Okay. So you see here more corroborating evidence. I'm going to continue. It says Jewish tradition held that God revealed himself to his people through the Ark of the Covenant in the Temple of Jerusalem, which rested on the foundation stone, making the center of the world. So the Ark of the Covenant's been there. We're saying that Jerusalem is Cusco and City of David. So there is a reference of the Ark going to the City of David because it's a fortress. We also said that Saksaywaman is also a fortress, is heavily fortified, had a citadel, had a tower, just like the City of David had a tower where they took the Ark of the Covenant. And we're going to read later on how heavily fortified this site was, Saksaywaman, especially this part of the Milo where the towers were. How the Spanish described it, to have so much military weapons, and it was just heavily fortified. They were like ready for war. So what other place would be best for a place to bring the Ark of the Covenant if this is the City of David? You know, that basically Saksaywaman was a military fort, and so was the City of David. Okay, on top of it being religious locations for both cultures. Regarding the Kingdom of Cusco, says Cusco was long an important center of the indigenous people. It was the capital of the Inca Empire. 13th century. Many believe that the city was planned as an effigy in the shape of a puma or sacred animal, but we don't believe anymore. We're trying to connect everything and know, right? So we know that Tupac said it was the lion city, not believe it was puma, it was the lion city, okay? And it continues. How Cusco was specifically built or how its large stones were quarried and transported to the site remain undetermined. They don't know. Of course they're never gonna know, man. They don't know anything. Under the Inca, the city had two sections. All right, very important. Remember, there's two sections. So Cusco, the city of Cusco had two sections, the Urin and the Hanan, each divided to encompass two of the four provinces, Chichasuyu, Antisuyu, Kuntisuyu, and Kuyasuyu. A road led from each of the quarters to the corresponding quarter of the empire. So again, two sections, just like Jerusalem, you're going to see it was divided in two sections, upper and lower, just like Saksauman is a little bit higher than Cusco.
So as the Jewish people, again, listen to me, are referred to as the people who live at the center of the world, and actually the literal Hebrew reads the navel of the world. Cusco, literally translated, means navel. The capital of the Inca Empire was situated at Cusco, high in the Andes. Tradition states that the city was founded according to the geomantic principles. It says here, Jerusalem, as the capital of the Holy Land, Jerusalem is called the Earth Navel. The city is divided into two main sections, again, the lower city to the east and the upper city to the west. Okay? Again, upper and lower, just like Saksaywaman and Cusco, right? Upper and lower. The city was divided into two sections, Hanan, upper or high, and Hurim, lower, just like Jerusalem, which paralleled the social organization of Inca society into upper and lower moiety social divisions. The upper city was formerly known as the land of Moriah, where God led Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. Abraham called the place Jehovah Jireh, translated Jehovah will provide. The lower city was known as Salem, translated peace, Salem, right? So what's under Saksauman is Cusco, right? And it says, so the lower city is called Salem, so Jerusalem, right? Translated peace. Melchizedek, meaning king of righteousness, was its earliest recorded king and priest. When Joshua entered the promised land to conquer it for Israel, the Amorites had united the upper and lower cities. In Hebrew, it is called Jerusalem, Jerusalem, Shalayim, a plural word reflecting the fact that it was two cities.
So, yeah, let's continue with the name here, Jerusalem, right? So the names of Jerusalem, according to Wikipedia, refers to the multiple names by which the city of Jerusalem has been known. So Jerusalem is the name most commonly used in the Bible, and the name used by most of the Western world. The biblical Hebrew form is Jerusalem, adopted in biblical Greek as Jerusalem, Jerusalem, or Jerusalem, or Ierosolima, and in early Christian Bibles as Syriac Ursilem, as well as Latin Jerusalema, or Jerusalem. In Arabic, this name occurs in the form Ursalim. The name Shalem, whether as a town or a deity, is derived from the same root as the word Shalom, meaning peace, so that the common interpretation of the name is now the city of peace, or an adobe of peace. The ending Ajim indicates the dual in Hebrew. Listen to this. Thus leading to suggestion that the name refers to the two hills on which the city sits. Again, two different parts of the city, upper and lower, just like Saksauman. So in this dictionary from 1898, we have a description of Jerusalem, right? We're going to start out right here where it says, the lower city was taken and burned by the children of Judah after the death of Joshua. But the Jebusites had so strongly fortified themselves in the upper city on Mount Zion, right, lower city, upper city, right? In the upper city is where they were fortified, where they had the tower and the fortress, right? Just like Saksauman, Saksaywaman is on the upper part, and Cusco is in the lower part, or Jerusalem. That they maintained themselves in possession of it till the time of David. That monarch, after his 7 years' rule over Judah and Hebron, a lot of people are linking this to Tiwanaku in Bolivia, the ancient city of Hebron, and because of the king of Anak, so Tiwanaku, Anak. So that would be a future video. Became king of all Israel, on which he expelled the Jebusites from Mount Zion and established here the metropolis of his kingdom. The city now took the name of Jerusalem, or Jerusalem, a term which denotes the abode of peace, or according to another derivation, the people of peace. Jerusalem was built on several hills, the largest of which was Mount Zion, which formed the southern part of the city. A valley toward the north separated this from Accra, the second or lower city, right? Again, upper and lower. So this book is called Egyptian Language, Easy Lessons in Egyptian Hieroglyphics with Sign List by E.A. Wallace Butch. And I was able to find this. As you can see here in the top, it says Heru Kenti Peru, right? Which means Horus, master of temples, supposedly. And then right under that, Heru Kentui Peru, the two Horus gods, master of temples. And right under that, Heru Kenti Peru, right? It says eternal Horus. So we can see that the word Peru is used in Egyptian language. And I did tell you earlier that, you know, Egypt was on this side of the earth and everything is backward. So Hiru, right? And also, I saw this in the book and I wanted to show you guys. It's interesting. It says Heru Shemsu, right? Remember Shem, David of the line of Shem. Shem was given the middle of the earth. Mount Zion is considered the navel of the earth. Cusco is considered the navel of the earth. So just want to show, I'm not sure if it's related, but as you can see, it says a group of mythological beings of the last divine king of Egypt. Last divine kings of Egypt. Okay. And it says here, for many years, Saksaywaman has been considered a fortress. Okay. And despite being the scene of a number of bloody battles, recent excavations have revealed a number of sacred objects that have made archaeologists rethink its purpose. If it was an imposing and impressive designed fortress, it was almost certainly a major ceremonial and religious site as well. Okay, so I'm telling you, this is the city of David, right? So the city of David was a military fort and also a very ceremonial major religious site as well, just like Saksaywaman, as you're reading right here, okay?
So it says David dwelt in the fort and called it the city of David. David built round about from Milo inward, 2 Samuel 5:9. In the quote above, it is quite clear that David first captured the fort and called that fort the city of David, but it also had another name. So it says, nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, the same as the city of David, 2 Samuel 5:7. Alright, now, so it's about to get interesting now. I don't know. So hope you guys ain't being bored. Hope you guys are not bored yet. So, city of David, right? Fortification, citadel, right? It had walls, it was fortified, right? It was on Mount Zion, right? So I want to show you this. So this is Saksaywaman site in Cusco, Peru. Little hill, well not little, it's overlooking Cusco, right? The city of Cusco, the ancient city of Cusco and the modern city of Cusco. So this is right over it. You're kind of right together. That whole part in the ancient times was all together, right? So you can see these big megalithic walls, rocks, right, creating a wall. And you can see the zigzag pattern in the wall. They fit perfectly in zigzag, right? It says the line, look, this is Josephus talking. And pay attention to this because I'm glad I found this. It says the line, so this is still Josephus talking, right? It says the Tower Trinity, we know. The line must have passed in a curved or zigzag direction from some unknown point on the first wall, between the Jaffa Gate and the Charam and Antonio. So this is Josephus, right? Okay, very important. So now again, same site, Saksaywaman. Look what it says here. Saksaywaman looks down on the city of Cusco from the northwest. Again, Josephus writes, while the whole compass of the city, he's talking about Jerusalem, right, was 33 furlongs, now the third wall was all of it. Wonderful. It was the tower, right? Where was the tower? Cephinius, elevated above its northwest corner. The wars of Jews. Saksaywaman looks down on the city of Cusco, or Jerusalem, from the northwest. The structure with its zigzagging walls describes a fortress.
Alright, so it says here, Josephus' description of Jerusalem. Right, it says, the city of Jerusalem was fortified with 3 walls. Again, 3 walls. Use your senses, people. On such parts as were not encompassed with unpassable valleys. So not all the parts had 3 walls, just some parts. Okay? For in such places it had but only 1 wall. Let's continue. It says, the city was built upon 2 hills, which are opposite to one another, and have a valley, what do we see in this picture? A valley to divide them asunder, at which valley the corresponding rows of houses on both hills end. Of these hills, that which contains the upper city is much higher, and in length more direct. It was called, accordingly, it says, it was called the Citadel. Okay, the Citadel, by King David. Now look what it says here. Saksaywaman is a citadel on the northern outskirts of the city of Cusco. This is Wikipedia again. Saksaywaman is a citadel, just like the city of David. What is a citadel? Well, Wikipedia says, a citadel is the core fortified area of a town or a city. Okay, a fortified area of a town or a city. So it may be a fortress, castle, or fortified center. Okay, the term is a diminutive of city and thus means little city. So called because it is a smaller part of the city of which it is the defensive core. I guess like they're saying Jerusalem and city of David is one big thing, right? It's just they're separated the two into like 2 little cities or separate cities, but they're one big complex. And with the city of David is where the fortified part is, right? Just like Saksaywaman is where the fortress is, and it's overlooking Cusco, the navel of the world again, just like Jerusalem, the navel of the world. Alright, so let's continue here. It says, in a fortification with bastions, the citadel is the strongest part of the system. Sometimes well inside the outer walls and bastions, but often forming part of the outer wall for the sake of economy. It is positioned to be the last line of defense should the enemy breach the other components of the fortification system. A citadel is also a term of the third part of a medieval castle, with higher walls than the rest. It was to be the last line of defense before the keep itself. Alright, so again, we just saw the description, or we just heard the description of Jerusalem by Josephus, describing the 3 walls, lower and upper part, and how the upper part is the citadel, or the fortress, the city of David. We write what a citadel is, and just looking right here, it says Saksaywaman, an ancient Incan citadel, just a stone's throw away from downtown Cusco. Okay, so right next to Cusco. High up on the hills, behind the city of Cusco, again, right next to Cusco, right? Higher, the walls of Saksaywaman can be seen from Plaza de Armas. Saksaywaman itself is an old Incan citadel, famed for its remarkable large, dry stone walls with boulders carefully cut to fit together tightly without mortar. And so if you're into construction and you understand that, imagine. I want to bring your attention to where I think the Milo and the reference in the Bible here, they're referring to in the city of David is this part in Saksaywaman, which is where the towers and the most fortified part was, which is called the Muyu Marka, as you can see here, Muyu, which is a round Incan building which is situated within the fortress of Saksaywaman above Cusco. It was used as a temple of the sun, but became part of a complex of rectangular buildings which mostly still remain today. However, the temple and the two flanking towers were dismantled during the Spanish rule. What remains of Muyu Marka indicates that it was a round building, round, right, just like the Millo roundabout, with an open central court which had a fountain. And we're going to read that City of David, and where it was located, had a reservoir pool, a fountain as well. The temple had triple walls, okay? The temple had triple walls. Remember that, triple walls. We're going to get into this again. Which were aligned with zenith sunrise and the anti-zenith sunset. Again, triple walls.
All right. So, can we count? 1, 2, and then another one, 3. And it goes like mostly 1, 2, 3. Fortress. Another one, just in case you guys still, 1, 2, 3. It says description, located on a steep hill that overlooks the city, right? It overlooks the city of Cusco. The fortified complex has a wide view of the valley to the southeast.
Alright, so we just heard from Saksaywaman the description, right? It has a view of the valley, right? Look at this picture. So a view of the valley to the southeast. So if you're in the valley or in Cusco, and we're saying it's Jerusalem, the lower part of it, and you want to look up into Saksaywaman, obviously it's the opposite, so what would it be? Northwest. You would look up northwesternly from Cusco, the lower city, or from Jerusalem, the lower city, to the upper city, or the upper fortress of Saksaywaman, or the upper city of Jerusalem, which is the city of David, or the Citadel. And as I'm also about to show you also where the city or the palace of Herod was located, in the upper part, in the northwestern part of Jerusalem. Let's take a look at that right now. So in reference to the walls of Saksaywaman and how they're so closely fit together, all, the corners of them, I found this interesting in Wikipedia regarding Herod's palace in Jerusalem. It says here, it was built in the last quarter of the 1st century BC by Herod I the Great, king of Judea, from 37 BC to 4 BC. It was the second most important building in Jerusalem, after the temple itself in Herod's day, and it was situated at the, again, listen to this, northwestern wall of the upper city of Jerusalem. Remember, Jerusalem has two cities, so we're telling you that Jerusalem is Cusco and the whole complex, which includes Saksaywaman, which is the upper part, is the fortress, right? So right here telling you that Herod's palace is in that part of the city where the fortress is right now. Same as City of David was located. On the northwestern wall of the upper city of Jerusalem, the western hill abandoned after the Babylonian sacking of Jerusalem. It says Herod lived in it as its principal resident. So it says here, continuing with Josephus' description of the palace, right, of Herod's palace. It says, the largeness also of the stones was wonderful, for they were not made of common small stones, nor such large ones only as men could carry. So he's saying they're not just any big stone that anybody can carry. Not even like these are not stones that anyone can carry. They're so big, they're larger than big, But they were of white marble, cut out of the rock. Each stone was 20 cubits in length, and 10 in breadth, and 5 in depth. They were so exactly united to one another. Again, they were so exactly united to one another that each tower looked like one entire rock of stone. So grown naturally and afterward cut by the hand of the artificers into their present shape and corners. So little or not at all did their joints or connection appear low as these towers themselves on the north side of the wall. Thus the king had a palace inwardly thereto adjoined which exceeds all my ability to describe it. For it was so very curious as to want no cost nor skill in its construction, but was entirely walled about to the height of 30 cubits, and was adorned with towers at equal distances and with large bedrocks, it said. So Man, if that doesn't describe Saksaywaman and the walls that it has, I don't know what else does. So, and it's telling you it had towers, just like Saksaywaman says. Marco, remember, had a tower. All there was 3.
The account of Francisco Pizarro, brother Pedro Pizarro, it says, on top of a hill. So they're talking about they're in Cuzco, and then on top of that, right, from Cuzco, on top of a hill, the Inca had a very strong fort surrounded with masonry walls of stones and having 2 very high round towers, right? And in the lower part of this wall, there were stones so large and thick that it seemed impossible that human hands could have set them in place. They were so close together and so well fitted that the point of a pin could not have been inserted in one of the joints. The whole fortress was built up in terraces and flat spaces. The numerous rooms were filled with arms, lances, arrows, darts, clubs, bucklers, and large oblong shields. There were many morions. There were also certain stretchers in which the lords traveled as in litters. Pedro Pizarro described the detailed storage rooms that were within the complex and filled with military equipment. Okay, so that place was no joke. They were ready for war anytime. And David was ready for war anytime. Okay, now remember, we're talking about Saksaywaman here. We're not reading the Bible, but we know that David conquered and he had armies and he was powerful like that, right? Military-wise, he took over the city of David, right? And he had Citadel. He had sent the ark there to take care of because it was protected there. So just like they're saying, the storage rooms here within the complex and filled with military equipment. It says because of its location high above Cusco and its immense terrace walls, this area of Saksaywaman is frequently referred to as a fortress. The importance of its military functions was highlighted in 1536 when Manco Inca laid siege to Cusco. Much of the fighting occurred in and around Saksaywaman, and it was critical to maintain control over the city. So descriptions of the siege as well as excavations at the site had recorded towers on the summit of the site, as well as a series of other buildings. Okay, so there was towers there, right? There was towers there. They're not there anymore. They took them down, so there was towers there. So it says the best known zone of Saksaywaman includes its Great Plaza and its adjacent 3 massive terrace walls. 3 massive terrace walls. 3. My people, 3. Pay attention. 3. Just like how they describe Jerusalem with 3 walls. The stones used in the construction of these terraces are among the largest used in any building in pre-Hispanic America. They display a precision of fitting that is unmatched in the Americas. The stones are so closely spaced that a single piece of paper will not fit between many of the stones. This precision, combined with the rounded corners of the blocks, the variety of their interlocking shapes, and the way the walls lean inward, is thought to have helped the ruins survive devastating earthquakes in Cusco. The longest of 3 walls is about 400 meters. They're about 6 meters tall. Here's a reference of the size of some of these stones, so you can see the lady right there, right? Huge. Huge. See? Heavy fortification. So it says, but David did capture the fortress of Zion, which became David's city. It was a fortress, right? Look at the walls between the walls. You know, 3 walls. There's 3 walls right here. 3 walls, okay? You can see how these rocks fit perfectly together. This is a fortress. This is fortified. And before it was like this, there was more rocks on top, more construction. But the Spaniards took out, the littler stones. They couldn't move these ones, so they left these behind. But it was much higher originally. Okay. This is inside. Exactly. Okay. It's beautiful here. Perhaps imagine this back in the day when the Incas lived. This whole thing is the site of Saksaywaman. This over here is Cusco, right? It's overlooking. Cusco is higher than Cusco, right? Saksaywaman, right? All the walls, right? The field over here, the three walls, right? It's a fortress. Saksaywaman, located on the outskirts of the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, it rests on an artificially leveled mountaintop and consists of 3 outer lines of gargantuan walls. 1,500 feet long, 54 feet wide, surrounding a paved area containing a circular stone structure, believed to be a solar calendar. The ruins also include 500,000 gallon water reservoir, 500,000 gallon water reservoir storage, cisterns, ramps, citadels, and underground chambers. So again, the southwestern hill, upper city, and upper marketplace. Also the Sumerian or Fortress of David. From the 4th century, this hill has also been known as Zion. And on it today is the so-called Tower of David. Okay? Tower of David on Zion in the upper city, which is the Fortress of David. Remember, it was the Milo, built on the foundations of 2 heroic great towers. It says chronicle writer Garcilaso de la Vega, okay, wrote that there were 3 towers at Muyumarca, at the top of the walls. These towers were built at an equal distance from each other, forming a triangle. The main tower was erected in the center, and it was a cylindrical shaped one. This tower was called Muyumarca. The other 2 towers were, so one of the towers was Muyumarca, Miyu is a tower, citadel, right? It says Milla, Wikipedia, right? The Milla was a structure in Jerusalem first mentioned in the book of 2 Samuel 5:9 and corresponding passages in the books of Chronicles and the books of Kings. However, it is mentioned as being part of the city of David and seems to have been a rampart built by the Jebusites prior to Jerusalem being conquered by the Israelites. Okay, the text also described a Milo built by Solomon and repaired by Hezekiah, without giving an explanation of what exactly the Milo was. There is some debate among scholars as to the Milo's specific nature. But down here, this is what is really, we're going to start seeing what it really means, because it says Hezekiah's repair of the Milo is mentioned within a list of repairs to military fortifications. Okay? So they're saying that it's recorded that when Hezekiah repaired the Milo is mentioned within a list of repairs to military fortifications. And several scholars generally believe that it was something connected to the military activity, such as a tower, citadel, or simply a significant part of a wall. Okay, tower. So, Milo, tower, right? Circular, roundabout, inside of the city of David. What our critics failed to notice is that whilst the building was going on, the ark had to be kept somewhere else. It had to be safe, and we're safer. It had to be safe, and we're safer than David's citadel, Zion, the Milo. When the temple was finished, therefore, Solomon had the ark brought from out of the city of David, which is Zion. That's in the Bible, it's a verse. In other words, that part of the city known as Zion, the citadel. Again, on Wiki visually, the Milo was a structure in Jerusalem first mentioned in the book of 2 Samuel 5:9. Corresponding passages in the book of Chronicles and the book of Kings. Okay? So this, however, is mentioned as being a part of the city of David. The text also describes Milo, built by Solomon and repaired by Hezekiah, without giving an explanation of what exactly Milo is. So we're starting to see what Milo is, right? So it's down here, it's kind of hints to us. Hezekiah's repair of Milo is mentioned within the list of repairs to military fortifications, and several scholars generally believe that it was something connected to military activity, such as a tower, citadel, or simply a significant part of a wall. So Millo was part of the city of David inside, like a tower, citadel, right? Where were they holding the ark and all that?
So let's look at this right here. So I'm telling you the Millo, remember? It's what I'm saying is I believe is the Muyu. So the Muyu, right? While today only the walls and the foundations of the Inca buildings remain, the site was home to several impressively large structures, including the Muyu Marka, a 30-meter high tower of 3 concentric circles that served as an imperial residence. Okay, City of David. There were other towers in Temple of the Sun, but the Spanish looted most of the stones to help build Colonial Cusco, forcing today's bewildered tourists to rely on their imaginations. Not just the tourists, but all of us. Alright, because they got us on the other side of the world. Alright, so let's continue reading about Millo.
Probably a tower, it says. Dividing Jerusalem, 2 Kings 12:20. It says probably a tower. For in Judges 9:6, Judges 9:4-6, Judges 9:4-9, Millo is interchanged with Migdal, tower. The name may mean filling, filled up, completed, the fortification of the city of David. On the northwest corner of the wall, on the slope of Tirothian Valley, where Zion had least height and needed strengthening. So again, in reference to the Millo, on taking the Jebusite citadel, so David built the city from the Millo, round, Millo. Solomon raised his levy to repair Millo. Kings 11:27, so Hezekiah, it was part of the city of David. Septuagint translated Millo, the citadel. So the Millo is the citadel, the tower that was in Saksauman, or in the city of David, right? So now, Saksaywaman, right? It says often it is mentioned as Muyu Marka or Muyu Marka in question language, but sometimes it is written as Muyu Marka and even Moyog Marka. So this is the dictionary Quechua. This is the Quechua dictionary, right? In Spanish. So it says Muyu, huerta, Muyu, redondo, circular, or round, Muyu, right? Muyu, circumference. What does Marka mean? So says Marka. Okay, so it says Marka here. Pueblo, aldea, señal. So it means like either town, village, town or village. So round village, the town. So that was like a tower, right? Remember, it was big. Pretty big. It was square. It had 2 towers. Okay, so it's a village. Okay, so you can see what these words mean.
And it says here, Muyu, very similar word, right? It's again Quechua, Muyu, Millo, Muyu, circle. The duplication indicates that there is a group or a complex of something. A complex of circles, also spelled Muyo or Muyo, is an archaeological complex in Peru. Okay, so what do you see?
This is one of the 3 ruins consisting of the 3 concentric circular wall ruins. So they're talking about this right here. The circular thing right on the middle or right on top of the Saksauman ruins, like the Muyu. Now watch. This used to be a tower. Let's go back to Millo. So Ezekiel's repair of the Millo is mentioned within the list of repairs to military fortifications, and several scholars generally believe that it was something connected to military activity, such as a tower, citadel. So Millo, many have connected it to tower, citadel. Again, it was a structure mentioned first in the book 259, being part of the city of David, part of it. Okay? It says here, without giving an explanation of what exactly the Millo was, we're going to find out, we're going to learn what the Millo was. So again, the Millo Marka, Millo, why am I called, look at this, Millo, Now, if you go to Millo right here in Wikipedia, it gives you some references, right? So you go to, it says, for the mountain Apuramic region, Peru, see Millo, Apurumac, Millo. For the mountains in Cusco, Millo Cusco. Just real quick what it says here, let me show you. Millo Cusco, Millo Urku, Murku, Muyuk, Marka, Millo. Okay, it says Millo, Hispanicized spelling of Millo. And where is this located? In Cusco. Where is Saksaywaman located? Cusco. Overlooking the city of Cusco. In the Andes of Peru. Peru. So it's a Hispanicized spelling of Millo. Right? Millo. What is Millo again? A structure Jerusalem, first mentioned in the book of 2 Samuel, in corresponding passage in the book of Chronicles and book of Kings. However, it is mentioned as being part of the city of David. And it even says that Hezekiah put it on a list of repairs as a military fortification. He repaired the Millo, he said it was a military fortification. And several scholars generally believe that it was something connected with military activity, such as a tower or a citadel. Right? What was the exact one again? Saksaywaman is a citadel. Northern outskirts of the city of Cusco, Peru. Are you guys following me? Let's go. So it says the construction. So it says here the construction of Saksaywaman. The immense fortress was put together with the use of huge stone blocks. Nobody knows exactly who built Saksaywaman, and most importantly, how. Machu Picchu can be admired for its great location and splendid views rather than its construction. Saksaywaman can be admired mostly for the remarkable architectural engineering skills that were needed for its creation. The Incas told the Spaniards that they weren't the ones who built Saksaywaman, but the giants. The giants. In their mythology, there were huge people living in the Cusco area, and they carried the huge stone blocks and put them together. Now we remember about the luminary, the angels, the stars, falling and, mating with the daughters and having giants. That's Genesis 6. Alright, so how far-fetched is this? And right now, nobody can build megaliths like this in the world. Nobody can explain them. They told the Spaniards, the Incas told the Spaniards that it was built by the giants. There were huge people living in Cusco area. They carried huge stone blocks and put them together. That's what they said. The city of Cusco was built in the shape of a puma. Okay, remember, and Wikipedia told us the shape of a lion. Okay, so lion. The head of the puma was actually Saksaywaman. Saksaywaman was a massive fortress of the Incas capable of accommodating 5,000 fighters. Okay, just like the city of David is a fortress, citadel. Today the complex is in ruins, but we know from chronicles, the words of mouth from local Quechuans, that it was bigger, higher, and even had towers. It had towers. Okay, back to Millo. Hezekiah's repair of the Millo is mentioned within the list of repairs to military fortifications, and several scholars generally believe that it was something connected to military activity such as a tower or citadel. So they're calling the Milo or the Citadel of David, and they're relating it to Saksaywaman. So you see, it's not just me. 3 water channels were constructed, which were probably used for filling a reservoir in the center of the site. A reservoir, a pool, right? There was a pool inside of David, City of David. Remember the pool, the fountains. So 3 channels were constructed and made a reservoir, a pool inside. Otherwise, not much is known about Marka. So they don't know what it was for, right? This guy either. The exact purpose of it is still not known. It might never be determined. You think it might never be determined? We're waking up, and the energy's open now. I think we've broken the spell. So it's time for us to wake up, and we can figure this out. We could figure this out. Let's say Saksaywaman was David's citadel or Millo. David built on top of what was already a sun worship and temple location. It is also written that David is buried here, along with Solomon, near a pool in the north wall of Jerusalem. I have suspicions that this is okay. Jerusalem. So it is written that he was buried there, right? And again, if you read that verse in the Bible, I forget which one it is right now, but we're gonna find it soon probably. We're gonna run into it again. It says that he was buried, and they've never been able to prove it or find it or any kind of archaeological indicating that. And of course, they're not gonna find it if they're looking over there in the Middle East, right? Or Africa. That was Africa. That was Ethiopia. That was Asia. That was India back then. So here we have an aerial view of Saksaywaman, and we're going to show you what the Muyu Marka is, right? So the Muyu Marka, right, is right here. It's this round thing right here. We're going to look at it right. So it says here, Muyu Marka is an archaeological site in Peru. It is round Inca building, a round Incan building, which is situated within the fortress of Saksaywaman above Cuzco. It was used as a temple of the sun, but became part of a complex of rectangular buildings which mostly still remain today. However, the temple and the two flanking towers were dismantled during the Spanish rule. So it's telling you right here, Muyu Marka was a tower, right? The flanking towers were dismantled during the Spanish rule. What remains of Muyu Marka indicates that it was a round building with an open central court, which had a fountain. A fountain. A court with a fountain. A court with a fountain. Just like the city of David, and where he lived. The temple had triple walls, which were lined with the zenith sunrise and the anti-zenith sunset. You see it? Muyu Marka on top. The Milo, right? It was part of the city of David. Roundabout, right? Roundabout. Again, Muyu Marka. What remains of Muyu Marka indicates that it was a round building with an open central court which had a fountain. Milo, the Hebrew Milo, the Citadel of David, built by the city. From the Milo roundabout to Samuel, Solomon raised his levy and repaired the Milo. It was part of the city of David. Translated Milo, the Citadel. It says here in Edicott's Commentary of the Whole Bible, Volume 3, 1 Kings, Esther, Volume 3. Right, this is a book. It says Milo, or as it always has a definite article, the Milo, the Hebrew word seems to signify piling up or heaping up, and its most simple meaning would be a fortified mound.
Alright, so yeah, I just wanted to slow it down a little bit. So yeah, man, if you made it this far, hey, thank you for taking this journey with me, just sitting through this and watching this, and hope it hasn't been boring, hope it's been interesting. So we've been able to see that there's some correlation with the navel of the earth, the middle of the earth, with Jerusalem, Mount Zion, and also Cusco. Cusco means the navel of the earth. We've seen that Jerusalem is described to have 3 walls, zigzag walls. We see a zigzag one has the same exact thing. It's a fortress, just like the city of David. I'm telling you, the city of David is the zigzag one. It has a citadel, it has towers. The Muyu, the Milo used to be towers. You can see we've already talked about that. And yeah, so just gonna get into the Jebusites. I know you've heard about the Jebusites a lot so far. So it says how they used to be the ones that were there before David took over, right? And actually, it's funny because the Incas also mention how they were thereafter, and how the Kilkade culture, it says on Wikipedia, were there before the Incas. The Incas say somebody else was there. I'll go ahead and show that. And so it's matching with the King David and the Hebrews and the Jebusites, right? It's matching that they took over the city. So here we go about the Jebusites again.
And it says here, now the Jebusites who were the inhabitants of Jerusalem, or the city of David before, and were by extraction Canaanites. So they were Canaanites, that's what they're saying here.
And just a little more reference to the Canaanites, and what I'm saying is the Jebusites. Well, what the last thing we read said. So this is here, during the time, the 18th century BC, the Canaanites built a massive tower above the Gihon Spring. So we're going to talk about also how all these springs and aqueducts under Saksauman, and also the city of Jerusalem, the Citadel of David, had so many pools and reservoirs, just like Saksauman. So we're going to talk about that as well. So it says, this spring, since it was the main source of water supply in the area, the tower was connected to the fortified city above the spring. Okay, the fortified city, the tower was connected to the fortified city above. And again, more reference to the Canaanites in Canaan. So it says here, Joshua headed the army of the Israelites during the conquest of Canaan and defeated the king of Shalem, named here as Jerusalem. So you're hearing this? Okay. And his coalition of 5 Canaanite kings. So they've had beef with these Canaanites, the Israelites and the Hebrews. That's their enemies, right? So it makes sense that David would conquer the Jebusites if Jebusites are the Canaanites, right? So let's keep going. Now it came to pass when Adoni-Sedek, king of Jerusalem, had heard how Joshua had taken Ai. Therefore the 5 kings gathered themselves together and went up. Joshua therefore came unto them suddenly, and the sun stood still, and the moon stayed until the people had revenged themselves upon their enemies. Joshua chased the 5 Amorite kings down to Asika. The Israelites slew the Amorites, and God cast great hailstones which destroyed them. Joshua 10:10-11. So it says here, although the king of Shalem was defeated, the Canaanite city stood against the Israelites. During the following 200 years of the judges, the Israelites could not conquer the Canaanite city due to these walls and water supply complex, as per the Bible. So they couldn't penetrate because of the walls. I'm telling you, this is Saksauman, and I'm showing you how big the walls are there and how it was even bigger. That was a fort. So imagine, and it keeps going here. And the children of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites that inhabited Jerusalem. So look, I guess it does corroborate Canaanites with Jebusites. And then we're going to read how now we're going to get to the part where, again, David takes over Mount Zion and turns it into the city of David from the Jebusites.
It says here, the conquest of Jerusalem, right? It's the King James Version. You can pull out your version, but and the kings and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, who spoke to David, saying, You shall not come in here, but the blind and the lame will repel you. Thinking David cannot come in here, nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, that is, the city of David.
So again, as a reminder, the Inca also, took over Saksauman, or the city of David, as I'm telling you, right? It says here, the Capac people occupied the region from 900 to 1200 prior to the arrival of the Inca in the 13th century. So that's like, what, 300 years? You see that? Almost 200 years, just like the Canaanites had Jerusalem, alright? So it says prior to the arrival of the Inca in the 13th century. Carbon dating of Saksauman, the walled complex outside Cuzco, established that the Kilke constructed the fortress about 1100. Alright, so that's what they're saying. They're giving them the credit. They don't know how they did it, but that's how they're giving them the credit, alright? And just to continue with the Inca taking over, it says here in the Cusco mythology, talks about their gods, I guess. Mythology race created by the great god Vircho, who caused them to be born from the sun god Inti. The first 8 Incas were thus born of Tiwanaku, Anak, which people say is King Anak in the Bible, of the city of Hebron. Alright? Future video. Or in an alternative version, they emerged from the sacred Pacaritambo cave, and then they migrated down to the Cusco Valley, led by Manco Capac or Manco Capac and Mama Oclo. It says here, the group fulfilled the earlier prophecy whereby they should settle where the golden staff could be easily driven into the ground. But it says here, important part, before the Incas could prosper though, they first had to defeat their local rivals, the Chanca, a feat they achieved with the help of the stone giants, the Purulaucas. This event did have a basis in reality, as the Incas did indeed defeat the Chanca in 1438 CE. Thus the Inca capital was established. The name Cusco may have derived from the Cusco meaning dried up lake or bed, but we know it means navel. Cusco means navel in Quechua. Alright, so you see they took over and created Cusco. They took over Cusco, right, from somebody else, just like King David took it from the Jebusites.
It says here, City of David and Zion. It is clear by 2 Samuel 5:7 and 1 Chronicles 11:5 that the citadel, Zion, of the Jebusites became the city of David, or as G.A. Smith calls it, David's bird. After its capture by the Hebrews, the argument for placing Zion on the southeastern hill are given elsewhere. See Zion, but a few acts relevant especially to the city of David may be mentioned here. The capture of the Jebusite city by means of the gutter, 2 Samuel 5, which is most recently explained as Warren's shaft, the reference to David's halt on his flight, and his sending Solomon to Gihon to be crowned, on 1 Kings, you can see all the Bible verses, you can pause it if you want, and the common expression up, used in describing the transference of the ark from the city of David to the temple hill. Now David said on that day, whoever climbs up by way of the water shaft and defeats the Jebusites, the lame and the blind were hated by David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. The ruins also include 500,000 gallon water reservoir, 500,000 gallon water reservoir storage, cisterns, ramps, citadels, and underground chambers. Underground chambers.
So it says here, ancient tunnel discovered on the sacred Inca city of Cusco. The tunnel measuring 2 kilometers in length, linking the Coricancha temple with the fortress of Saksaywaman, located on the outskirts of the Peruvian city of Cusco. You see, tunnels that extend all the way to Saksauman and the temple of Coricancha. So aqueducts, to get the Jebusite city, yes, very possible. You see that there is a tunnel under Saksauman.
Says here, earth navels, right? Again, the Delphi one, such as Delphi or Jerusalem, but in certain cases, the original name of the site contained a translation of the word navel. It appears then that certain sites were given the status during construction. The ancient Peruvian capital, Cusco, for example, literally means navel. So it's not like the other ones in the earth that are just named navel for spiritual reason or cosmological reason. Cusco literally means navel of the earth, right, the center, and it acted as such to the Inca Empire during its great expansion. The mythology of Cusco recalls that the city was located by the children of the sun from Tiwanaku according to the pre-designed rituals. 7 wonders of Cusco, the belly button of the world, or navel, right? If you ever come so lucky as to visit the belly button of the world, that's what the Quechua name of Cusco translated to. You're guaranteed to be constantly surrounded by the magical beauty of this ancient place. You see 3 walls. You see 3 walls right here. Okay, heavily fortified. Heavily. Cool. Shout out to King Drop. All of them, basically waking everybody up, man. Like,